Next up, we
There's
have Penn State, the Nittany Lions.
so many teams in this conference.
Oh, this is a nightmare, dude. This is a nightmare. So, this to me feels like it's going to be the Ace Baldwin show. I mean, after that, I'm just not really sure. Like, I know Mike Rhodes, he's trying to just bring VCU to to the Big Ten and play this grinded out defensive style. The problem is when every other team just has better athletes than you, you're going to get outplayed from a physical standpoint. You just are. And I think that's a lot of what we saw with Penn State last year. Like, Ace Baldwin rocks. Ace Baldwin's awesome on both ends of the floor, one of the best two-way players in the conference. I think he's another guy who has a great chance to be a first-team all-conference player. It just, yeah, like, when you factor in the team success, it's like, yeah, the voters at the end of the season will be like, Penn State was, they were 4-16 in the Big Ten this year. Like, do we really want to give the nod to Ace Baldwin? But then again, the Big Ten first team is like 20 guys, so maybe that doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, I don't. I really don't know what to make of this roster. On paper, I really like the Freddie DeLeon edition. I think that provide. I know he didn't pan out or work it, or maybe just he just is going to benefit from a change of scenery than from Knoxville. But again, one of those just upside swings. There was a reason he was ranked so high coming out of high school. I do like that. I mean, it's just again one of those teams that, like, on paper, the spacing isn't there. I do love Puff Johnson being a guy. This is just something from having combed over their roster. Puff Johnson being a guy that only averaged 0.2 assists last season. That's like one of those scenarios. This is a separate argument, not at all about, or separate tangent, not at all related to Penn State basketball. But 0.2 assists a game feels a lot like when, like, you fail a class from not trying. Like, it's almost harder to do that than it is to pass.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you actively have to make a concerted effort to do that. I just don't. I don't know. We saw, like, Brad Underwood have to kind of change his style, right, when he came from Stephen F. Austin when he got to Illinois. I could be wrong if I'm misremembering. But I just wonder if Mike Rhodes, maybe after this season, has to wrestle with that a little bit internally. Because last year, I know he was like, we're going to play like the hyper pressurized defense that defined his teams at VCU, like you said, and it just didn't. I mean, they went 9-11, so it's not like it didn't work so much as, well, it kind of didn't work. I don't know. We still finished in the bottom half of the conference, but yeah, I don't know. Is this team, like, on paper better than the one last year? I don't really know. Like,
It's
I feel
hard
like
to
it
say.
maybe
Like, losing
could
guys
be.
like Kanye Clary and Kudus Wahab is a problem, I think. Maryland legend Kudus Wahab, Georgetown legend Kudus Wahab.
Yeah.
I remember showing up to the Maryland Penn State game, and, like, I knew that he was on the team, but it was so weird to see him on that team. It was so bizarre. I mean, it's tough to square. Like, they were surprisingly another one of these teams that's surprisingly competitive in the Big Ten last year, which by the end of the season seems to be like everybody. But you just factor in, like, they have a legit star. They have a system that, prove it or not, like, they have an identity, I think, as a team. One of the big questions I have is what the spacing is going to look like. It's like Ace Baldwin is going to need some room to cook. And Penn State has a bunch of guys who theoretically can space the floor. It's just a question of whether they're going to reliably do that. So, like, DeMarco Dunn, we'll see what his role ends up being. Like, does he start? Is he one of the first guys off the bench? Like, we'll see. But he's a guy who can shoot the ball. Zach Hicks, Puff Johnson, both of those guys can space the floor. So we'll see. I mean, there's a world where they're competitive again, but I am not really that high on this Penn State team, to be honest with you. I think it's kind of similar to Minnesota, where they have a star player who's going to put up a bunch of numbers, and the rest of the team is going to kind of let them down. Because I also like I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm just not crazy confident. I understand they went 9-11 last year, but big picture, I'm not crazy confident that Mike Rhodes' VCU system is cut out for the Big Ten. And I think it's just a question. Like you can totally get away with that type of thing in the A10. I think it's just a question of how long it takes him to like realize that and pivot. 'Cause he's a very good coach, and like his VCU teams were good. But I think there kind of needs to be a little bit of an identity change for Penn State, whether it's this season or in the future, for them to start to be a little bit more competitive.